Hey guys, welcome to Silicon Valley Girl. Today, we're going to talk about a deck that you can use to present your startup to investors. I've pitched LinguaTrip, my startup, I think around 70 times, and I got to around 6 yeses from investors. That means we've closed the deal, we've closed the round, and today I'm going to talk about a presentation, about a deck that you can use to present your startup. You can send it over to investors. You can use it during your pitch. We're going to go slide by slide, and I'm going to explain what exactly you should talk about in order to get investment. So if you're interested in raising money in Silicon Valley or anywhere else in the world, continue watching this video. There are a couple of disclaimers that I wanted to start with. First of all, not every startup, not every company has to be venture-backed. For example, if you're thinking of starting a bakery, you don't really need venture capital because venture capitalists are looking for 10x, 20x growth. They're looking for companies like Facebook. They're looking to invest $50,000 today and get $250 million in a couple of years. Yes, you can do something with a bakery and venture capitalists because I remember when we were at 500 Startups, which is one of the best accelerators in Silicon Valley, we had a startup that did cookie delivery and they raised $1 million. I'm not sure what's happening to them right now, but if you have an innovative idea in an old space, that could also be venture-backed. But again, if you're just starting a beauty shop or maybe a bakery, it's not probably worth it to spend your time and go and pitch it to Silicon Valley investors. There are other types of investors that might be looking for dividends, but those guys, they're looking for hockey stick growth, which means today you're making 100, tomorrow you're making 1,000, and in a year you're making $1 million. Another thing that would help you determine whether you should raise money from Silicon Valley investors or not is estimating what kind of market do you have there. So for example, when we're talking about LinguaTrip, it's very easy to say, oh, this is like languages, $100 billion market. Not really, because we're talking about study abroad trips, and then we're talking about study abroad trips that are booked through an agent or through a booking platform. So this is our market, and it's around like $10 billion. So this is something you need to estimate for yourself, and anything that's less than $2 billion might not be super interesting for investors. Another thing that you should remember is that investors are constantly monitoring the market. They would be listening to pitches from different companies that might be doing the same thing, and then they would select the strongest team to invest into. What does this mean for you? First of all, research your competition. Don't say that you don't have any competitors. You always have somebody doing the same thing. And second, investors are not trying to steal your idea. I think this is a very popular misconception. People will be like, I don't want to pitch my startup idea to this investor because they're gonna go to another startup and say, do this thing. Investors are not looking to do that. Their job is to identify great companies. Their job is not to copy whatever you have in your mind. And yes, ideas are great, but the most important thing is execution. So don't be afraid to pitch your startup. And the last but not the least, before we go into the whole deck thing, I wanted to remind you that there is a funnel when you are fundraising. In order to raise a round, on average, you would need 150 to 170 in-person meetings with investors. That means around 150 or 160 no's in order to raise a round from 10 investors. So just be ready to pitch your company many times, to hear a lot of no's, to answer a lot of questions. If you're sure that you're doing the right thing, if you love what you're doing, I'm sure you're going to get through it. Again, just be ready. Now, let's get into the deck. In order to go through this presentation, I'm going to use an app called Decktopus. They are sponsoring this video. Decktopus.com is a web app that already has templates, and they have one of the best templates in the world for a pitch deck. Because when I was preparing for this video, I wanted to take Airbnb's initial presentation because they went through Y Combinator, they were mentored by Paul Graham, and of course they know how to do that. But then I opened the template from Decktopus and I'm like, it's just enough. This is a perfect mini presentation because normally you would have 2 decks. One would be a teaser deck, 13 slides, something that we're gonna do today. And this is what you need for your initial pitch. This is something you can send over email, and this is something that you can use when you're raising your first money. If you already have traction, maybe you're making like $10 million a year, then you're probably raising your Series A. And Series A presentation deck is around 40 to 50 slides, just because you just need more data, you need more market analysis. But again, if you're just starting out, 13 slides is the maximum that you need. You don't need to do an in-depth analysis of whatever you're doing because you don't have a lot of traction right now. Another thing that I like about Decktopus is that it's a non-line app. That means that whenever you come to a VC's office, you wouldn't spend and waste too much time accessing your deck because everything is online. You can download it as a PDF, because the worst thing that can happen is when you come to a VC office and then the format is wrong, you don't know how to access your deck. But with Decktopus, it's going to be online and accessible from anywhere in the world. And another thing that's really important, Decktopus style is really minimalistic, and sometimes we tend to overdo with design. So you're not going to have a mistake of overdoing with design if you use Decktopus templates. If you want to start using this app, the link will be below, and there is a promo code for you to get a discount. Again, the link is below. There is a free trial, there is a free version where you can just create a couple of presentations for free. Now let's get into the deck itself. First of all, your first slide would be your company's name and maybe a one-liner. What is a one-liner? What your company does in one sentence. For example, LinguaTrip is a study abroad booking platform. That's it. Something that you can explain in 5 seconds. This is your first slide. Your second slide is a problem that you're solving, because a lot of people would go and try to explain what their company does and start about their proprietary technology and amazing team. But here you just need to tell investor, hey, there are so many students trying to learn a language, but because they're using apps all the time, they just can't speak the language. Maybe they know how to solve problems with the language or go through the tests, but they can't use it to work. They can't use it to study. And this is what LinguaTrip helps them solve. We connect them to language schools abroad. I'm just going to talk about LinguaTrip here because I've done this many times. But again, you're talking about your company. You are talking about a problem. So what is this problem that people experience every single day or ideally every single minute, and you're solving it? So start with this. Now the next slide is your solution. Here you can have either text of what your company does. For example, LinguaTrip is a marketplace that connects language students to language schools abroad. It's a one-stop shop for every student where they can book their language course, accommodation, and get their visa. Or if you can visually present something, you can have screenshots of your app or of your website. But here you talk about what your company does. Slide number 4 is where you insert your images. Maybe you want to illustrate how the profile looks like on your app, or maybe you want to illustrate the design or whatever. So this is where you show off. Sometimes, if you want to insert a short video, that's okay. But again, don't overcomplicate, because there is a big tendency that there is a 50% chance that your video is not going to play in your investor's office, and you don't want that. You want to make it as simple as possible for you and for your investor to understand what you're doing. Market analysis. Remember when I started talking about your market, you can't just say, oh my God, LinguaTrip is operating on 100 billion education market, because this is too big. We're not operating on the whole education market. We're actually in languages, and we're in languages where people travel. And we're only addressing students who are booking through a platform, not those who are going directly to schools. So narrow your market as much as possible. But again, don't forget that something that's less than 2 billion might not be too interesting for a venture investor. But try and do your research, read market analysis, read magazines on your industry. It was really hard to get the data for us, for example, because there isn't a lot of research out there about study abroad. But try and do your best. Again, you know better than your investor, and even a rough estimate of your total addressable market. This is not the whole market, this is something where you operate. It's called total addressable market. Some research would be great on this slide. The next slide is for you to talk about your audience. You can talk about either top countries. This is something that Decktopus offers. But you can also talk about your average profile. For example, we target students from 18 to 25 years of age, living in those countries. Their interests are languages, education, etc. They have intermediate knowledge of a foreign language. So be, again, as specific as possible, because if investors see that you know your target audience, that means you know how to market, that means you know their problems and you know how to solve them. The next slide is your business model. How do you make money? What are customers paying you? How much you're retaining? What are your costs? Explain that. So for example, LinguaTrip earns 20% commission on any course booked through the platform. Maybe if you have some other data like your attraction so far, or maybe the maximum amount of money you were able to make per customer, then insert it here as well. Show off your numbers. By the way, Dave McClure, who was running 500 startups when we were back there, he was the guy who told us to start with numbers if your numbers are really good. So for example, if you made $1 million in a couple last month, start with that because you're gonna grab people's attention. It's always okay to change the order of the slides. Just make sure you have all of them in your presentation, but it doesn't mean that you have to follow step by step as I'm saying here. If you have something that you want to show off, maybe you have some celebrity customers or celebrity investors, show them off at the beginning to just make people listen more carefully to what you have to say. The next slide, your competitors. Remember, you have them. You absolutely have them. I don't believe that you created an idea that nobody thought about. And if you have created something like that, then why haven't been people solving it? That would be a question. It is actually okay to have big competition because that means there is a market and that means there is market opportunity. So don't be afraid to name your competition, but don't forget to mention why you're better than them. Number 9. Your stats. Probably if you're just starting out, your month-over-month growth would be the best stat to show off. 20% month-over-month, 40% month-over-month. If you have good revenue in dollars, then show that off. For example, last month we did $400,000 or whatever. Your best number should be here. But normally investors will want to see your revenue, whether you're cash flow positive or not, probably not, but anyways, how much you're spending in a month and what is your growth in terms of revenue and in terms of costs. Then number 10 is your team. Normally you would have your co-founders here. Maybe you have some prominent C-level employees, then show them off here as well. And give a couple of sentences about every single person. Number 11, future steps. What are your plans for the next couple of years? If you have a potential acquirer in mind, you can mention them here. If you have plans for IPO, mention them here. Like, what is your end goal and what are your goals for the next couple of years? The next slide is really important, number 12. Why are you here? How much are you raising? What is your valuation? What are the terms? Normally, if you're raising in Silicon Valley, you have your Delaware C Corp, you're raising with an instrument that's called convertible note. So you have your cap, you have your discount, and you have the amount of money that you're raising. And it's really important to mention what are you going to use this money for. The best answer when you're growing would be, oh, we just identified that this and this demographic really needs a product. The cost of lead is this, this, and this. So we're going to pour our budget into developing a product further, developing some features, and also marketing to this demographic because we know this is what's going to bring us a lot of traction. And the end slide, you don't have to have it, but I would have it just saying thank you, time for question and answers. This is just for you to navigate through the whole thing and kind of have this final step in your presentation. And then be ready for a lot of questions for investors because if they're interested, they're going to bombard you with a lot of questions. Be friendly, be willing to explain things. And at the end of the meeting, just thank them for their time. Don't forget to follow up. I was talking to one of our investors yesterday. I was like, by the way, why did you invest in the first place? Because we were making this movie about LinguaTrip, and I was like, why did you invest in us in the first place? And he was like, I really like your pitch, I really liked your business model, but there was one thing that really stood out. You followed up the same day. So the same day after a meeting, I wrote him a follow-up email. Thank you so much for talking to us. You asked about this, this, and this. I gave them some additional information. I attached our agreement, the investor agreement, just in case. I always did that. This is something that 500 Startups advised us. So if you think that investor is going to invest, if he said yes, follow up with an agreement that is very easy to sign, maybe through an app called DocuSign or whatever you're using. Be the one who initiates the next step. Always follow up, be friendly, and even if the investor says no, keep them updated. Every month, just what's going on with your company, how are you growing, and how are things going with you. They're gonna appreciate it, and maybe they would invest not this month, but in a year or a couple of years. We have a lot of those stories, by the way. Thank you guys so much for watching this video up to the very end. I know this is not a typical topic for this channel, though it's Silicon Valley Girl channel. I'm looking forward to reading your questions down below because they're gonna help me come up with the next topic for a similar videos. So please comment down below below with whatever questions you have about fundraising. Again, I've raised a round for LinguaTrip, so I know a lot about that space. We'll be looking forward to reading your comments. Please subscribe to this channel if you haven't yet. And if you enjoyed this amazing content, please smash the like button. I'll see you very soon in my videos. Bye bye.